And welcome into this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and the Locked On Detroit Red Wings podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Locked On Detroit Red Wings podcast your first listens of the day. For everyone on the Red Wings feed, let me introduce myself. My name is Armando Velez. I'm from PantherParkway.com. You can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And very thankful to be doing yet another crossover, a divisional pre-season crossover with the guys from Locked On Detroit Red Wings, Scotty Bentley and Brian Fisher. What's up, guys?
Honestly, I'm really pumped. This is a really fun division, and last year when we talked, had a good time then. So little bit of a new team for us at least. I'm pumped, man. I'm really pumped.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. Particularly about this conversation because, like Scotty said, the Red Wings have changed a lot this offseason, but the Florida Panthers have seen the departure of quite a few faces on their roster and the addition of one major face to their roster. So I'm excited to talk about that with you as well.
Yeah, and it's crazy because you talk about different changes to both of these rosters, one that won the President's Trophy and one that was, out of the playoffs and all that stuff. And let's talk about the Detroit Red Wings first. And, you add David Perron, Dominic Kubalik from the Chicago Blackhawks, former Florida Panther Ben Sherratt, Ville Husso from the St. Louis Blues, Andrew Kopp, who helped the New York Rangers get to the Eastern Conference Final. And there's also quite a few players who have been signed to their ELCs recently. Simon Edvinsson signed his ELC. Their most recent draft pick in Marco Kasper, even though it looks like that he's going to be playing in junior, and Sebastian Koza, who was just playing in the World Juniors for Team Canada. We were talking about pre-recording. Even not only is the NHL team going to be an exciting one in Detroit, but even in Grand Rapids for the Grand Rapids Griffins, that seems to be an AHL team that's going to be an exciting team for that part too.
Yeah, one of the guys that you didn't mention there was Elmer Soderblom, and he also signed an ELC. He was drafted a couple years ago. He's 6'8", and he was one of the more notable players for Frölunda in the SHL this past year. He's going to be making the transition to Grand Rapids, so he's a player a lot of Red Wings fans are going to be keeping an eye on because I believe, let me double check, but I believe he was a 6th round pick for the Detroit Red Wings. And Red Wings fans after Datsuk and Zetterberg love their diamond in the rough type players. And he was super, super good this last year with Frölunda, and his coach singled him out as one of the best players during their Frölunda's run in the playoffs. He's a big guy, and when you're that big, you combine that with as good of a stride as he has, which big guys don't typically have, and as good of the hands as he has, he could be a threat. Big reach, soft hands, net front presence. He's going to be something to watch out for. And of course, you have the possibility, if Simon Edvinsson doesn't make the NHL roster, that he's going to go to Grand Rapids. He's playing in North America, one way or the other, I believe. So if he's not going to be at the NHL level, he's going to be at the AHL level. You put him down there, and if Jonathan Berggren doesn't make the NHL roster as well, I mean, that's a lot of high caliber professional talent, along with Albert Johansson and Donovan Sabrango. I mean, the Grand Rapids Griffins didn't make the playoffs this last year. But if for whatever reason, Simon Edvinsson and Berggren don't make the NHL roster, and you also bring in Elmer Soderblom, that's all of a sudden a very, very dangerous Grand Rapids Griffins team. So they're going to be as exciting to watch this season, I think, as the Red Wings are, but for a different reason.
Yeah, I think there's also just looking at the timeline of the Red Wings of since Yzerman took over, really, this was a team that when he took it over had a very harshly declining NHL product and really no farm system to speak of. And now we have turned that around in just, a few years. And I mean, we'll talk about the NHL team for sure as the show goes on and the strides that they're taking, but the farm system is definitely one of the biggest areas that I circle when looking over what Yzerman has done well in his tenure so far. And like I said, we'll talk about the NHL product, but just to be able to completely, honestly, revitalize and rejuvenate an entire farm is unbelievably impressive. And yeah, there's a lot of kids to be really excited about.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't remember the exact question that Steve Yzerman was asked this summer when talking about where the Red Wings are in their rebuild, and he said where I believe the answer was we're in year 3 of the rebuild, not exactly making any promises. Last year, Pierre Dorian got a lot of flack for saying the rebuild is over. I guess Steve Yzerman in that situation kind of saw it as we're in year 3. So and I was looking at front office confidence rankings based on Dom Luszczyszyn of The Athletic. I talked about this on my Friday show about where the Panthers stand. They're 7th in the NHL. And Detroit, I saw that they were 3rd, right behind Tampa Bay and Colorado. Of course, Steve Yzerman does have that track record of what he did in Tampa right before coming back to Detroit. But he says we're in year 3. And that just goes based on really been there, done that for him.
Well, here in Detroit, we also have a very recent example of what could go wrong when you say the rebuild's over with the Detroit Tigers. So
same owner, by the way. Same owner owns the Red Wings that owns the Tigers. Yeah. Chris Ilitch said the rebuild is over going into this catastrophic Tigers season. So we're very aware of the repercussions of that statement. But
Yzerman is hyper aware that the rebuild is never over until it's over. And you don't know the rebuild is over until the team starts producing. He's always been the type of general manager to keep his cards close to his chest. If you were to watch their exit interviews at the end of the season, the amount of things he says without saying anything at all, like he can give you an answer and you'll look over that answer and you're like, there's no substance here. And that's intentional because he doesn't want to show his hand, which is what makes him such a very good general manager. And I mean, I think when it comes to the confidence ratings, a lot of it has to do with, like you said, what he did in Tampa, what he means to Detroit even before he was general manager, as a player. So there's a little bit, we're careful on our show too, because we recognize there's a bias there, of course. I mean, he built a Stanley Cup champion in Tampa and he was the captain on 3 Stanley Cup champion teams in Detroit. But everything that he was done, and like Scotty said a couple minutes ago, he was given nothing when he came to Detroit. So the bar is kind of low for Yzerman, but I'm not using that as like a slight against him. All he had to do was make smart draft picks and make smart trades and make the right fly, like taking a flyer on a guy like Robbie Fabry, or he made a ton of other guys who I'm trying a blank on right now that didn't work out, but he didn't lose anything in the process. Like Brendan Perlini, who I mentioned on Friday, he got Brendan Perlini for nothing. So he's okay with taking flyers on guys, and if they don't work out, cutting them loose. So while he's made a lot of safe moves up until this free agency where he finally spent, I totally agree with the confidence that Red Wings fans give Steve Yzerman, because while they were safe moves, that's what this team needed in this rebuild, is it needed smart, safe moves. The one move that we criticized him over was the Moritz Seider draft pick, and that one, we were all wrong on. Happily wrong, but we were all wrong on. So, like, he makes the smart moves, and then when he does go out there and he makes a pick that people are shocked by, he hits it out of the park. So I'm not surprised by the confidence rating whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. We talked about it on Friday's show as well, actually, and it's just like Brian said, I mean, the bar is, I guess, low for the time being, just in the sense of like what people expect out of the NHL product. But
it's
think
raising this year, though, I think.
For sure. Absolutely. And I also think that everyone can just see a direction, which is something that all 4 of these teams in this city have lacked for like so long. So just like having like a clear and plain, everybody understands what we're trying to do and where we're headed and the direction we're headed and everything. There's a clear game plan that he has so far executed very well.
Well, and that's what I meant too when I said like he's making the smart plays. It's the direction. I mean, the biggest problem this team had when he took over was there was no depth and absolutely no defense and no goal. And like one at a time, he's taking care of that. He got Moritz Seider. Next year, he got Lucas Raymond. Then he got Simon Edvinsson. Then he traded up and got Sebastian Kosa. He traded for Nedeljkovic and now Husso. So one at a time, when I'm saying he's making these safe plays, it's because he's doing what the team needs to get better. He's addressed all of the biggest depth issues and not all at once. And that's a big thing too, is he hasn't eaten up cap space all at once trying to make the team immediately better. It's been a process. And that's what I mean when I say he's making the safe plays.
Mm-hmm. And with $40 some odd million in cap space next year to pay Dylan Larkin, again. You get Ville Husso just because really the cap commitment to Jordan Binnington in St. Louis, it benefits Detroit in that situation as well. So lots of flexibility and still lots of draft capital as well continued for the Detroit Red Wings going forward. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where the guys are going to put me on the spot, ask me some Florida Panthers related questions. But first, we have a special announcement from the National Highway Safety Administration. And it can happen so easily. You're out with your friends or coworkers. You're putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many. It's time to go. And for a moment, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you're a good driver. You live nearby. You can make it home okay. What are the odds you get pulled over? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? You lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, or you kill someone. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Play it safe and plan ahead and get a ride. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, continuing on this second segment of this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and the Locked On Detroit Red Wings podcast. So gonna give the guys the floor to ask me some Florida Panthers related questions.
Okay, so the first thing, I mean, the most obvious thing to talk about when talking about the Florida Panthers, I think, is you guys, or the Panthers rather, traded away Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar, two huge pieces of the Florida Panthers core, which I would have thought was like absolute. No way those guys get traded. Traded them away for Matthew Tkachuk, who, granted, is 4 years younger than Jonathan Huberdeau rather, and also 100-point scorer. But, and me and Scotty talked about it when it happened. I was under the impression that the Panthers really didn't need to make that kind of move. That the only thing the Panthers really lacked going into the playoffs this year was playoff experience. And not only did you trade, you traded for a younger 100-point scorer, which is great, but you also traded away Mackenzie Weegar, who's a stud. My question for you, Armando, is do you see this trade as a win, and do you think it makes the Panthers better in the long run?
I think for a short term, you're going to take a hit. But there's a lot of dead cap on their roster this year, about $6 million with Keith Yandel's buyout and still Scott Darling's contract from their trade with the Carolina Hurricanes is still on the books right before they signed Sergei Bobrovsky. So there's still a lot of dead cap on their roster. So even before that trade for Matthew Tkachuk, the Bill Zito was starting to do a little bit of debt signings, $1 to $2 million here. It was going to be really hard to keep Claude Giroux and Ben Sherratt and Mason Marchment on the roster. So, and Mackenzie Weegar was always seen as a guy that was going to be a rental this year for the Panthers, and then he was going to eventually walk in free agency. But I just think about it like this, about paying Jonathan Huberdeau an 8-year deal until he's 37, 38 years old versus Tkachuk. And I thought about it. I thought about this at first. Right before the trade even happened, I recorded a whole episode of just his interest in being interested in the Panthers was always going to be a bonus for the Panthers. And I thought that a trade would have cost an Anton Lundell, and that's a piece that a lot of Florida Panthers fans would be heartbroken if they had to part with him. That's Bill Zito's very first draft pick, but he's described as a unicorn, Matthew Tkachuk. And when you have an opportunity to get a player like that and two guys who are on expiring deals, it creates, right before this trade even happened, I spoke about the Florida Panthers' window being 1 to 2 years. This extends it by at least 5 to 6 around there. Barkov's locked up for another 8 years. Ekblad's contract has three more years on it, 3 or 4. I'll need to double check on the top of my head. But still, even with this move of Tkachuk and having to pay Spencer Knight next year, it still creates that cap flexibility for the Panthers next year and beyond to get even younger and extend a window.
I think kind of along this same conversation there, like we were talking about in segment 1 about our rebuild, and while you guys never went through the complete like tear down and like completely bottom out, like there definitely was a retooling, I would say, era, like right around like 16, 17, right? And for a couple of years there, we just kept hearing about like, hey, like the Panthers are gonna like they're coming and like they're retooling and like it's gonna work out and they're gonna jump back in front. And then this past season obviously took a huge step forward with the offseason that you guys have had, and we just talked about the big trade and everything. What is, I guess, the expectation for this? I mean, you already kind of touched about, immediately you take a hit, but what's the expectation this season? And in that same breath, like coming out of that retooling era, like how I guess sustainable do you think it is? Yeah.
It's funny because even the last offseason for the Panthers, like just about 360 something days ago, when they were offering contracts to Sam Reinhart and Sam Bennett, we were looking at this of 3 to 4 year contracts of each person. Nobody was getting an 8-year deal, so that every single year you have an opportunity to reset and to retool every single year, and that you don't strap yourselves for too much big cat commitments unless it's a superstar player. And only 3 players remain from the Panthers from their COVID bubble season just a few seasons ago. So that's just crazy how much of a turnaround the Panthers went through without having to tank a season or two. So it just goes to show the job that Bill Zito has done to create a winner. And even before that 2020 season where we were all in pods, basically, the Panthers were seen as a team that was just a bubble playoff team, exceeded expectations, and then a team that was the expectation was at least second or third in the division, exceeded expectations once again. So, of course, a coaching change is gonna, and a superstar player coming to the mix, that's going to change a few things. And it's going to be hard to replicate 122 points to win the President's Trophy. So a step back is going to happen. We all know what it's going to it's going to be there. But getting Matthew Tkachuk is a net front presence that the Panthers were missing, even though they have one in Sam Reinhart, is because during the playoffs, they weren't attacking in the middle. They were, a lot of their shots were coming from the outside and getting deflected. So something had to be shaken up. And I can only imagine how pissed Bill Zito was after that sweep against Tampa Bay. And it was just, and something had to be shaken up. And getting younger, this is definitely something that could be sustainable. And they expect every single night that they expect to win every single night.
I really like the way you summed it up there as far as the trade goes. It was a looking forward type move, not a looking at right now, because that does make a lot of sense if you have extensions, because there were extensions looming for both Weegar and Huberdeau, and so you weren't going to be able to keep both. So you flipped 2 expiring contracts for a guy who's 4 years younger. Like, now I completely get it. Now I completely understand. I guess my follow-up to that is, you kind of hinted at it there, Andrew Brunette took over for Joel Quenneville and led the Panthers to a President's Trophy. And last time we spoke, I asked you if this was because of or in spite of Andrew Brunette behind the bench. And clearly, Bill Zito thought that it was in spite of, because he went out and got Paul Maurice, who is an experienced head coach, has had some success at the NHL level. I guess I just want to know your thoughts on that, because after a President's Trophy, I mean, I would have thought he had a legitimate shot at staying behind the bench, but they went out there for a guy who was more experienced.
I just think that Bill Zito wants to win so badly. I mean, a lot of GMs want to win so badly.
It's their job, right?
It's their job. And I guess it's just based on how much he gave up during the trade deadline to try to go for it, and just seeing how they were 12 wins short.
Washington and
12 wins short, and they didn't even look good in the round that they did win. So he said, okay, it took a little bit of a while for Andrew Brunette to make his adjustments throughout the postseason, which is ultimately how the Florida Panthers got swept. Yeah, the players on the ice do have to play. They have to produce as well, but with a different voice and a guy who's been there, done that as a guy in Paul Maurice, this gives the Panthers a kind of new identity. I mean, Tampa Bay, even the year that they won the President's Trophy, they had to take a little bit of a step back in order to finally win. That was an example that I was talking about for a good week after the Panthers were eliminated. As tough as that was to talk about, but it was just necessary in order for the Panthers to get to where they want to. And I don't really subscribe to the whole Paul Maurice has the most regulation losses in NHL history. You know how you get there? By coaching so many years. That's how you get there. So I don't really subscribe to that part.
My follow-up question to that is, you got Mark Stahl on your team this year. And I guess this is not really a question, but more of a statement. But take care of him. We really liked him on the Detroit Red Wings. Obviously, it was a really weak defensive core. But you know what? That was a cap dump trade when the Red Wings acquired him. And he performed above expectations for Red Wings fans, enough to get that 1-year extension. And this past year, like, there are some moments where it's like, oh man, his age is really showing. But he was just such a great locker room presence for that team. He wore the A for the Red Wings. And I was really happy to see Mark Stahl get an opportunity with the Florida Panthers because, overall for his age at 35 years old, he played pretty well last year, all things considered, especially when you consider the team he was playing on. The Red Wings being the worst defensive team in the league and had the worst goals against per 60. Obviously him being on defense kind of contributed to that, I'm sure, but I really enjoyed Mark Stahl's presence, and his goals above replacement was kind of gnarly. I don't understand how he had such a crazy goals above replacement when his expected was really, really negative, but he produced some good offense for the Red Wings, on that bottom pair of minutes this past season. So I'm happy he got a shot with you guys.
He was solid, man. Yeah, he was. He was like everybody's dad on the team too.
Yeah,
called him,
so fun.
That's definitely something.
When I worked at LCA, and this is just now it's totally a tangent and an anecdote, but when I worked at LCA, his wife came through the store and I got to talk to her for a little bit, and I was just like, I'm really glad he's here because he's a lot of fun. And she said that he was really happy to be in Detroit because it's night and day with how he's been treated compared to New York, because those last couple of years in New York,
we're rough.
We're rough. So he's like, she was like, he feels welcomed here. And I'm like, good. I like Mark Stahl. And he's got a nice family. But that's a little totally off topic.
I have back on topic. I have one more question about the Panthers, and I have been a massive Bobrovsky fan since he was a prospect for the Flyers at like 20 years old. Like I always loved him and have followed him his entire career, and I just want to know about the goalie situation, period. I mean, he's had some like this past year was kind of a step back in the right direction. He had a really, really solid season this year. But the two before that were kind of a step back, and he obviously got the massive deal. Like, how does the contract work into the plans now, or maybe the future plans of the Panthers? And on top of that, is it is he just written in as like goalie one until the contract is over? Like, is that pretty much where everything is?
I think it's year by year for the contract, because of course GMs are going to take calls and they're going to discuss a few things. And there's reports saying that they were trying to work a trade for Bobrovsky during the trade deadline, but the chances of actually succeeding on a trade were very low. So
might get moved. That's like every single deadline because of how big the deal is. Yeah.
So going into the season, the confidence was very low on Bobrovsky, but then, but also this trade with Huberdeau and Uyghur, that the lack of cap flexibility with Bob having 10 million AAV made it harder to keep them as well. That's something that a lot of people don't really talk about in Florida Panthers circles. But with that Tkachuk trade, it gives an opportunity to still pay Spencer Knight and still have both of them, even though it's a very expensive goalie tandem. But for the Panthers and the front office, their hope is for Bobrovsky to still start 2/3 of the games, or even 75%, so that when they pay Spencer Knight his bridge deal, that it's not as high as a cap hit coming out of that, so that it could still be very manageable in case they're still unable to trade Bobrovsky's contract. Because I tell people this: don't hate the player, just hate the cap hit. Because and of course with goalies, year by year, we don't know, we can't predict how he's gonna go play this season. But hey, if it's anything like he played this previous season, it's a step in the right direction for this team.
So that leads me to my next question is, me and Scotty kind of already did a Atlantic Division prediction and where people are going to fall. And he and I are both in agreement that the Florida Panthers, despite, them having maybe a short-term hit points wise, we think they're going to be right in the mix for the top 3 in the division. So my question for you would be, where do you see the Panthers finishing in the division? And then the follow-up to that is, where do you see the Red Wings finishing in the division? Because I want to get outside perspective on that.
Well, I mean, we at the Locked On Network had a power rankings for at the Atlantic Division, and they were slightly off of what the original power rankings eventually showed, as voted by all of the Locked On hosts. And for me, I had Tampa Bay number 1, Florida 2, Toronto 3, Ottawa 4, Boston 5, Detroit 6, Buffalo 7, and Montreal 8th. That's how I ranked it. And I guess for you guys, the 2 rebuilds, Detroit and Ottawa, get compared all the time. At least I've been comparing them.
They're pretty much in lockstep at this point.
Yeah. I know there might be a little bit of biases because you guys are the hosts of Locked On Red Wings, but who do you think might have a better direction right now between Detroit and Ottawa?
I'm at risk of saying something.
Only one team has Steve Yzerman at the helm, baby.
Well, but the other team no longer has an owner that actively interferes in their, ongoings, because Pierre Dorian has looked a lot more competent now.
If that's the expectation, the bar is on the floor.
So Pierre Dorian's made a lot of smart moves ever since the passing of Eugene Melnyk, and I've been really impressed. The acquisition of Alex DeBrincat is huge for the Ottawa Senators, and obviously my bias has me scream like, "Oh, I really want them to be better than Ottawa," but I could realistically see Ottawa be better than Detroit. I don't really care if one's better or worse, but Ottawa is such an interesting team because there's been several years in a row we've heard that they're supposed to be better, and they haven't really shown it yet. But every year I think that could be it. So I think for the purposes, I think that the Red Wings and Ottawa Senators are probably going to be fighting for 5th, if I'm going to be honest. But I won't spoil the rest of the rankings for the division. I won't do that yet.
No, I think that they do get compared a lot by like national media, like everybody, right? Like that's just, they both started their rebuilds around the same time. They both have young cores with like believed to be or already proven really high talent. It's just it's very easy to point at the two of them and compare the two. I do think that the Wings have a lot more flexibility going forward, and not that the Sens don't, but when you look at the assets, I guess is what I'm saying, the assets and the money that the Wings have just in the next couple of years is unbelievable. And I feel like even if Ottawa gets better sooner, long term, I still like what the Wings are doing better, if that makes sense. Like I could see a world in which Ottawa finally takes that big jump that's been talked about for years now with them. But I will still take ours long term just because of how many draft picks we still have left going in the next couple of years, how much cap we have over the next couple of years. I think that we're in a better position going forward, even though, again, that they might get better quicker or might be better than us this season. I think long term, I'll still take us.
So my question then is, we know where Scotty and I fall with the Red Wings. We know where we all fall with the Panthers, but real quick, I know we're running up against it, but where do we think that the division's going to shake out in the end? Like, Armando, what do you think? And then Scotty and I will say what we think overall.
It's funny because Boston's a wild card for not like literally a wild card.
I was about to say,
right? Yeah,
but based on their injuries of McAvoy and Marchand that's going on with them. Of course, Krejci's back, but he's older. Bergeron's back on a cheaper deal. They can stay afloat for at least the first like 10, 20 games. If they can stay afloat, then chances of sneaking in can be a lot better. For their chances are a lot better. But and also with Toronto, the goalie situation there with Matt Murray
it got worse.
and
yeah,
Samsonov. But
and
Murray does have a better defense in front of him than he did in Ottawa. But I think I just see Toronto as that team who is going to be this year's version of the Florida Panthers. That team is going to be on a sprint to want to get home ice advantage. So I actually think Toronto is going to win the division, even though their goalie situation is a little worse. And I think it's going to be a battle of Florida in round one for this year instead of round two. For a third year in a row, there's going to be a battle of Florida. Who gets home ice? I don't think Tampa cares if they get home ice at this point. But I think that the Florida Panthers are going to finish second. I've been so back and forth with whether there's going to be 5 metropolitan teams or 4 and 4.
The Eastern Conference as a whole is really tough.
Yeah,
Metro and the Penguins and the Capitals, even though their windows are closing, they're still very lethal. So they could very much be in the mix. It's there, and then now Columbus, the addition of Goudreau, it's going to be crazy. The Eastern Conference compared to the Western Conference.
Yeah, I could very well see 5 Metro teams being there. I said that at the beginning of the offseason very confidently, but now it's just like, I don't know. The Islanders, I said at the beginning of the offseason that I think they would be back, but now after missing out on Kadri and Gaudreau, I don't think they're a playoff team this year. So there could be a different team in the mix this year as well in the Metro.
Yeah, I think with the Atlantic Division, how it's going to shake out, with the power rankings that came out, actually, were reflective of exactly how I voted. But I still see Tampa as the team to beat. They're just the most complete team. Yeah, they don't have an Austin Matthews, but they have everything else. Like, their depth is insane. They have fourth liners who would be second liners on most other teams. They're incredible. And of course, they still have Andrei Vasilevsky in that, who doesn't seem to be getting any worse. After that, I think I put Toronto, and I think third was Florida because of what we had talked about with the small step back. Fourth, I still have Boston because every year I say this is the year Boston slides. And then they don't slide. So, yeah, there's the obvious injuries. But even at, 38, whatever Bergeron's going to be, he's still the best two-way forward in hockey. So I think they have enough going for them. It's still, obviously they still have Pasternak, and Swayman was phenomenal last year, as was Olmark. So their goalie tandem's solid. I think Boston's still going to lock down that fourth seed. And then my bias is coming out here, but I think Detroit, with the young prospects that they have playing on the team now, combined with the free agent acquisitions they made, will battle it out, but get fifth from Ottawa. Then sixth will be Ottawa. And then seventh, eighth will be Buffalo and Montreal.
Yeah, when Brian and I did this show, we were lockstep the whole way, and we were like kind of weirdly disappointed that we were lockstep because we were like, oh, we don't really get to argue about anything.
Can't argue.
Yeah, no, like I'm in the same boat. I think it's very much there's the top three. They're kind of in a class of their own, and then Boston, Buffalo, Detroit, not even really Buffalo. Boston, Ottawa, and Detroit are kind of in another three where they're going to be battling out for potentially 3 teams, 1 playoff spot. And then Buffalo is kind of in its own class, and then Montreal is certainly in its own class at the bottom. Like, I think that's pretty solidified. If I was to put them in tiers, that would be how I would do it. I think there's pretty clear drop-offs at certain points in the division, but that those 3 in the middle are going to make it really, really interesting because, and that's not, Buffalo is they're
going to be good in a few years,
right? They're still Buffalo, but they should be, right? Like they should be headed in a right direction if they don't Buffalo it. So that's not a team that I'm trying to completely drag. I guess I kind of did, but you get what I'm saying. Like that is, they still have a decent direction and some good players on that team too. So I think the Atlantic, I don't know, for my money, it's arguably the best division in hockey. So I think it'll be super fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said it best. Tiers. When it comes to these three teams, of course. With Boston, I also didn't mention that there's a coaching change there with Bruce Cassidy now with Vegas, Jim Montgomery now in Boston. So it's gonna be a little bit hard to predict Boston. And
I think it'll be good for them.
Mm-hmm. And a new coach in, of course, Detroit. With it was heavily rumored that Steve Yzerman was going after one of the assistants in Tampa Bay. Of course, familiarity definitely helps. And we spoke about this even last offseason about Detroit, about it's an encouraging sign for the Red Wings to not be in the top 5 of the NHL entry draft now. Now that they're in this 8 to 15 range, now there's still a sense of direction, like you guys said even at the beginning of the show. So I really like the Detroit Red Wings and what they're building. I really do.
Yeah, there was just so much to talk about with the Red Wings. We completely forgot to address the head coaching change, which is, as big of a free agent acquisition as they made this summer. But yeah, I mean, just to say it briefly, it's great that they're out of that bottom 5, but you can't fall into that like 10 to 15 range. You can't stay there. And I think that's why Yzerman went really hard with coaching and free agent acquisition this offseason, because he realized you can't get stuck in that middle ground where you're not in the running for number 1 overall and you're not in the running for the playoffs, because that's how you just become a mediocre team and you don't accomplish anything. So I think that's why he spent as much money as he did this offseason, because he's like, if we're already too good to not be a bottom 5 team, we need to be good enough to make a run at the playoffs. And I think that's really what this whole offseason was done saying, is that this is the first step forward towards competitiveness, like legitimately, since the last time they were in the playoffs. Even though he never says the rebuild's over, and the rebuild's not over. Even though they're much better, they're competing for a wild card spot at best. But the difference is they're competing for a playoff spot. They're not trying to get 2 or 3 positions better. They're trying to make a leap of like 6 or 7 positions better. So that's really what matters. And that's why I think that all the acquisitions they made this offseason are so important. Whether or not it'll work out this first season remains to be seen, but I love the direction that it's headed. I think I completely agree with every step Yzerman has made.
Yeah, and definitely it's going to be fun when these two teams face. I definitely get to see what kind of direction the Detroit Red Wings are going to be
last
heading.
year. So I'm hoping it's fun this year.
Yeah. It wasn't fun the last half of the season. The first half had some fun moments.
For sure. But guys, I want to thank you guys so much for doing this crossover edition of Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Detroit Red Wings. Tell my listeners where they can find you guys online.
Me and Scotty were waiting for each other to go there. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Brian Fisher WWJ. And, locked at LO_Red Wings is the Locked On Red Wings Twitter account. That's where you can find me, us.
Yeah. And then I'm at, what is my at? At Bentley Scotty is my Twitter at. And then, at LO_Red Wings is the show.
What about the Tigers one?
Oh, at Locked On Tigers. There you go.
Yeah.
You can do that too if you're into baseball. Yeah.
Yeah.
Baseball.
And for, like I said last time during our crossover, for anyone on the Panthers feed who happens to also be a Marlins fan, if you want to hear some Miguel Cabrera talk on Locked On Tigers, you could listen to Scotty Bentley there. And for the Detroit Red Wings listeners, you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. So, guys, thank you so much, and I'll see you sometime this season.
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
of course.
Absolutely.
See us a lot.